The moon of Rygxel was silent, its surface covered with a thick layer of ice and dust. A small research station sat quietly in the center of the barren wasteland, a tiny dot of human technology in the vast emptiness of space. Inside the station, Dr. Alistair Cole sat at his desk, staring at the blinking lights on his console. He had been working here for years, all alone except for the occasional communications with Earth. His mission was simple: make contact with the Elrath, a mysterious alien species that had been observing humanity for decades. He had always dreamed of this moment. As a child, he had imagined meeting aliens, exchanging ideas, and building a peaceful future. But now that the moment had arrived, he felt a strange mixture of excitement and fear. What if they didn't understand him? What if they were hostile? These thoughts had crossed his mind countless times during his years of research. But today was different. Today was special. After countless attempts at communication, Alistair had finally received a response. A small ship, sleek and shimmering in the light of the distant stars, had arrived at the station. The Elrath had come. Alistair stood up and walked to the observation window. He gazed out at the ship, a silver blur against the dark sky, its smooth surface reflecting the light of the distant sun. He could barely contain his excitement. This was the moment he had waited for his entire life. He had prepared himself for this encounter, studied their language, their culture, their history. But nothing could truly prepare him for the person who would step off that ship. The airlock hissed open, and a figure stepped out. She was tall and slender, her skin a deep violet, almost glowing in the dim light of the station. Her long, dark hair flowed around her shoulders like liquid silk, and her eyes, large and almond-shaped, shimmered with a strange, otherworldly light. She was breathtaking. Dr. Alistair Cole? Her voice was soft but firm, with an unfamiliar cadence. It was melodic, almost musical, but there was something in it that made him feel both comforted and nervous at the same time. "Yes, I'm Dr. Alistair Cole," he replied, his voice shaky. "And you are?" "Bera," she said simply, taking a step forward. "I am an ambassador of the Elrath. I've been sent to communicate with your species. I hope we can have a productive exchange." Alistair nodded, still trying to wrap his mind around the reality of the situation. The Elrath were real. They were here, standing before him. This wasn't a dream. Vera was here to meet him. And this was the beginning of something far greater than he could have ever imagined. "Welcome to Rygxel," Alistair said, struggling to keep his voice steady. I've studied your species for years. I never thought I'd be the one to make contact. This is amazing." Vira smiled, a warm expression that seemed to make the cold, sterile environment of the station feel a little less harsh. "It is an honor to be here," she said. "We've been watching your species for quite some time. Your potential is extraordinary." Alistair felt a rush of pride at her words. The Elrath had been observing humanity, and now they had come to learn more. It was a humbling thought. He couldn't help but wonder what they saw in humanity. What was it that had drawn them here? "Shall we begin?" Vira asked, her voice snapping him out of his thoughts.
"Yes, of course," Alistair replied, motioning for her to follow him. "We have much to discuss."
"There are so many things I want to learn about your people, your culture, your history." They walked through the narrow hallways of the station, each step echoing in the silence. Vira seemed completely at ease, her long strides graceful and confident. Alistair couldn't help but notice how different she was from humans. Everything about her was so alien. Yet, at the same time, there was something deeply familiar about her. A strange connection that he couldn't explain. They entered a small conference room where Alistair had set up a table with monitors and data pads. The room was dimly lit, with only a few soft lights illuminating the space. He gestured for Vira to sit, and she did so, folding her legs beneath her in a way that seemed completely natural. Alistair sat across from her, his mind racing with questions. Vira's eyes met his, and for a moment Alistair felt a strange pull, something deep within him that made him want to say something, anything, to keep her talking. But before he could speak, she broke the silence. "We've studied your history, your wars, your struggles, and your achievements," she said. "You are a young species, but your potential is vast. You have learned to overcome many obstacles, but you still have much to learn." Alistair listened intently as Vira spoke. Her words were not harsh or judgmental, but there was a hint of sadness in her voice, as if she were speaking from experience. He wondered what had happened to the Elrath to make them so wise. What had they endured in their long history that had shaped them into the beings they were now?
What about you? Alistair asked. What about the Elrath? What's your history?
What struggles have you faced? Vira paused for a moment, her eyes distant as if she were recalling something painful.
Our history is long and filled with many challenges. We have fought battles, faced extinction, and learned to adapt.
But we have always believed in the power of knowledge and peace. It is through understanding and cooperation that we have survived and thrived. Alistair felt a deep sense of admiration for her people. They had survived hardships that seemed unimaginable, and yet they had remained committed to peace. It was a lesson he would never forget. Their conversation continued, each moment more fascinating than the last. As the hours passed, Alistair found himself growing more comfortable with Vira, more drawn to her. There was a strange warmth between them, a connection that he couldn't explain. It wasn't just the bond of shared knowledge or a mutual desire for peace. There was something deeper, something personal, something he couldn't quite grasp. When the meeting finally came to an end, Vira stood up, her graceful movements mesmerizing Alistair. He had never met anyone like her. She was so different, so alien, and yet she felt strangely familiar. "Thank you for your time, Dr. Cole," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "I look forward to the next time we meet." Alistair nodded, his heart pounding in his chest.
Of course.
I look forward to it as well. As she turned to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far more complicated than he had ever imagined, something that would challenge everything he knew about the universe and about himself. Days passed, and the research station on Rigzel became a place of unusual activity. Dr. Alistair Cole found himself consumed with thoughts of Vira, the Elrath diplomat who had stepped into his life like a dream he never expected to come true. He tried to focus on his work, but her image lingered in his mind. Her violet skin, her large, luminous eyes, the grace in her every movement. They were etched into his thoughts. It wasn't just her appearance that held him captive. It was the way she spoke, the way she understood things so deeply, yet with a sadness that seemed to haunt her. Alistair knew he should remain professional. This was a historic moment, the first real contact between humanity and the Elrath. The future of both species depended on his ability to foster peace and understanding. But as much as he tried to ignore it, a connection was growing between him and Vira. It was impossible to deny. Her words, soft yet powerful, echoed in his ears. "Human, I love you so much. I can't take it anymore." Those words had left him confused and shaken. At first, he had brushed them off as a misunderstanding, something lost in translation. But as the days went on, he began to realize that Vira wasn't speaking out of simple diplomacy or the desire to form a peaceful alliance. She was speaking from her heart. He could see it in her eyes whenever they met, in the way she lingered just a little longer than necessary when they spoke. He had tried to avoid her after that meeting, retreating to his lab and focusing on the technical aspects of the mission. But every time he was alone in the silence of the station, his mind would wander back to her, and his heart would race. The problem was, he couldn't understand why. He had always been professional, focused on his work, but this was different. Vira was different. One evening, as the station's lights flickered in the dim glow of distant stars, Alistair found himself walking to the observation deck. He needed a break, a chance to clear his head. The cold air of Rixel filled the small chamber as he gazed out at the empty landscape below. The moon's icy surface stretched for miles, a barren wasteland, yet it somehow felt more alive to him than it ever had before. He wasn't sure how long he stood there, lost in thought, when he heard the soft click of footsteps behind him. He turned and saw Vera approaching, her presence like a shadow moving across the cold, sterile room. "Dr. Cole," she said, her voice a gentle melody that made his heart race. "May I speak with you?" He swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions. He knew he should say something professional and neutral. But all that came out was a simple, "Of course, Vira. What is it?" She took a step closer, her eyes never leaving his. There was a hesitation in her movement, something that made Alistair's heart skip a beat. It was as if she, too, was unsure of how to proceed. "I've been thinking about our last conversation," she said softly. "About what I said." Alistair's pulse quickened. He knew exactly where this was headed, but he didn't know how to handle it. "Vera, you don't need to explain." "No, I do," she interrupted, her voice firm but gentle. "You need to understand that what I said wasn't just some diplomatic formality. It was the truth.
I care for you, Alistair." Her words hung in the air, heavy and filled with meaning.
Alistair felt his throat tighten. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he simply stared at her, unsure of how to respond. Vira took another step closer, her violet skin glowing softly in the dim light. "I know that our peoples are different. I know that a bond like this, between you and me, cannot be allowed. It is forbidden by my people, but I cannot deny what I feel." The confession struck him like a wave, knocking the breath out of him. He had never expected this, never imagined that an alien species so far from Earth could feel such a powerful, personal connection. "You don't have to feel this way," Alistair finally managed to say, though his voice was trembling. "This is impossible. You and we come from two different worlds." "We're not meant to be." "Don't say that," Vira cut him off, her eyes flashing with emotion. "You don't understand." "I've never felt this way before. I didn't choose this."
It's something that goes beyond reason. I can't explain it."
"All I know is that when I'm with you, everything else fades away. I've never felt more alive." Alistair stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. Part of him wanted to pull away, to remind her of the risks, of the danger they both faced. But another part of him, one that he couldn't ignore, wanted to reach out and take her hand, to tell her that he felt the same. "I care for you too, Vira," he whispered, the words escaping before he could stop them. The confession hung in the air, soft and fragile, like a delicate thread between them. Vira's eyes softened, and for a moment the distance between them seemed to shrink. She reached out, placing a hand gently on his arm, her touch warm despite the coldness of the station. "We cannot be together, Alistair," she said quietly, her voice filled with sadness. "Our love is forbidden. The Elrath Council would never allow it. Your people would never accept it. But I cannot fight what I feel." Alistair looked at her, his heart aching. He knew the truth of her words. They came from two different worlds, and the consequences of their feelings would be catastrophic for both species. Yet in this moment, standing on the moon's surface, with only the stars to witness them, the weight of their differences seemed insignificant. "I don't care what others think," he said softly. "I only care about you." Vera's lips curved into a faint smile, but it was a sad smile. She pulled her hand away slowly, her fingers brushing against his skin, before she stepped back. "We must be careful," she said, her voice low. There are forces within both our species who would see us separated. They would use our bond against us. Alistair nodded, his heart heavy with the burden of their situation. What should we do? Vira paused, her gaze steady. We continue to work together as we have, but we must keep this secret. Our feelings, our bond, must remain hidden, for the time being. Alistair knew she was right. They had no choice. Their love, their connection, could destroy everything they had worked for. And yet, he couldn't deny the pull between them. The way she made him feel alive, like he was part of something greater than himself. I'll do whatever it takes, Alistair said, his voice filled with determination. For you, for us. Vera smiled, her eyes softening. Then we will face this together, Alistair. But we must be patient. The future is uncertain, but we can find a way, if we're careful. The air between them seemed to vibrate with unspoken promises, with a hope that, despite the impossible odds, their love could endure. They stood there for a moment, both lost in their thoughts, before Vera turned to leave. I'll see you tomorrow, Dr. Cole, she said, her voice a whisper as she walked away. Alistair stood there, watching her go, his heart heavy but filled with something more, something stronger than fear. It was a strange, unexplainable certainty that no matter what happened, he would always stand by her side. The days that followed were filled with tension. Alistair Cole found himself walking a fine line between the professional duties that he had once held dear and the forbidden, powerful connection that had formed between him and Vera. Every time their paths crossed, it became harder to deny the pull between them. But the risks they faced, the political dangers, the secrets they had to keep, were a constant reminder of how fragile their bond truly was. The research station had become more than just a workplace. It was a place of secrets. Every time Vira entered, Alistair's heart would race, but he could not show it. Their conversations became more cautious, more carefully crafted, as if every word had the potential to reveal the truth they were hiding. Yet every moment they shared felt like a stolen piece of time, a fleeting treasure they both knew could not last forever. Alistair's thoughts were scattered one morning as he sat at his console working on the data from their latest experiments. The Elwraith had been kind enough to share their advanced technology, allowing humanity to learn and grow. Yet, despite the monumental achievements, Alistair found it difficult to focus on anything other than Vera. Her smile, her voice, the way she seemed to understand him better than anyone ever had. It was impossible to ignore. The door to his lab opened, and he turned to find Vera standing in the doorway. Her presence was magnetic, and for a moment, Alistair felt a wave of emotion rush over him. He stood up quickly, trying to mask the way his heart skipped a beat. Vira, he said softly, keeping his voice steady. What brings you here today? She stepped inside, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made Alistair's breath catch in his throat. We need to talk, she said quietly. Her voice, usually calm and measured, carried an edge of urgency that sent a chill through Alistair. Of course, Alistair replied, his mind already racing. What could have happened? What danger were they facing now? Vira's expression was serious, her violet eyes troubled. There are factions within both our species who have been watching us closely, she began, her tone low and filled with concern. They suspect something. They are beginning to understand that there is more between us than just a diplomatic exchange.
Alistair's stomach tightened.
What do you mean?
He asked, his voice barely above a whisper.
The Elwraith Council is not pleased, Vira continued. Our people have been watching, waiting for any sign of something between us. They believe it could threaten the fragile peace we've been trying to build with humanity. Alistair felt a wave of panic. The very idea of their feelings being discovered, of their connection being exposed, was enough to send both species into chaos. He had always known that this bond could be dangerous, but hearing it from Vera made the reality sink in. They were walking a thin line, and it was beginning to crack. "What are we going to do?" Alistair asked, his voice tight with fear. Vira's gaze softened, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "We have to be careful. We cannot let this go any further. At least not yet. If our feelings are discovered, it will tear apart everything we've worked for. The Elrath would see it as an act of betrayal, and humanity, well, I fear they would not understand either." Alistair felt a pang in his chest. The weight of their secret was beginning to crush him. He wanted to be with her, to hold her, but he knew that was impossible. Their love, if it could even be called that, was forbidden, and the consequences would be unimaginable. "I don't want to hurt you, Vira," Alistair said softly, his voice breaking with emotion. "I don't want to risk everything for something that can never be." "I don't want to hurt you either," Vira replied, her voice barely a whisper. "But sometimes, love is not a choice. It simply happens, and no matter how hard we try to ignore it, it stays. This connection, this bond, it is not something we can just turn off." Alistair closed his eyes, fighting back the tears that threatened to escape. He had spent so many years dreaming of making contact with an alien species, of helping humanity reach out to the stars. And now that it had happened, he was faced with the impossible, falling in love with someone from another world, someone who was not just an alien, but a being whose people's laws forbade the very thing they had.
What if they find out? Alistair asked, his voice trembling.
What if our secret is exposed? Vera stepped closer, her hand reaching out to gently touch his arm. Then we fight.
"We fight for what we believe in. We fight for each other."
Alistair looked down at her hand on his arm, his pulse racing. How can we fight something so much bigger than us? "We fight by staying strong," Vira said softly.
By holding on to each other. We cannot let fear control us.
But we must be careful. We must not let anyone see what is between us. Alistair nodded, his heart heavy. He understood the risks. He knew the consequences. But he also knew that he could never let go of her. No matter what happened, Vira had become a part of him, and that was something he could not deny. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said quietly. "For us, for you," Vira smiled faintly, but there was still a sadness in her eyes. "Then, we must be patient. There is much to lose, Alistair. If we are not careful, we will lose everything." The two of them stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. They both knew what was at stake, but neither of them could walk away from the bond they shared. The future was uncertain, and the path ahead was filled with danger. Yet, in that moment, all they could do was stand together, united by something greater than the world around them. As the hours passed, the tension in the station grew. Alistair knew that the walls were closing in on them, that the time they had left was slipping away. The factions within both species were watching them closely, waiting for a sign, a mistake, a reason to tear them apart. The next few days were filled with quiet exchanges and cautious glances. Alistair and Vera worked together, but their interactions became more distant. They spoke less, their words carefully chosen to avoid drawing attention. Every moment they spent apart only made the distance between them feel greater, and every moment they shared felt like a stolen gift. But despite the growing fear, despite the looming threat, neither of them could shake the bond they had formed. Every time they looked at each other, every time their hands brushed in passing, it was as if the universe itself had conspired to bring them together. And no matter how much they tried to hide it, the love they shared could not be silenced. One night, as the station grew quiet, Alistair found himself alone in the observation deck, gazing out at the stars. The vastness of the universe stretched before him, and he felt small, insignificant. But there was one thing that made him feel alive: the thought of Vera. He heard the soft sound of footsteps behind him and turned to see her standing in the doorway. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to disappear. "We have to be careful," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet resolve.
But I can't stay away from you, Alistair. I won't.
Alistair's heart swelled with emotion, and without thinking, he stepped forward, closing the distance between them. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her face, and for the first time in days, they allowed themselves to be truly present with each other. In that moment, they knew the path ahead was uncertain, and the consequences would be great. But as they stood there together, their hearts beating in sync, they realized that some things were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The silence that hung in the air of the research station felt heavier than it had ever before. The days following Vyra's confession had been filled with uncertainty and fear. Alistair and Vyra had continued their work together, but every moment between them felt like a delicate balancing act. Every word, every glance, every touch had to be measured, controlled. The risk of discovery, the danger of their love being exposed, was always there, lurking in the background. Alistair had spent hours staring out at the cold expanse of Rixel, wondering what would happen if everything they were trying to protect was shattered. He had always believed in science, in reason, in finding solutions. But this was beyond reason. It was an emotion so deep, so all-consuming, that it had no clear answer. There was no scientific formula that could explain why he felt the way he did about Vera. All he knew was that every moment he spent away from her felt like an eternity. Vyra, too, seemed to be struggling. The once serene diplomat had become distant, her eyes shadowed by the weight of their shared secret. There were times when Alistair caught her staring at him, her expression soft, but filled with something he couldn't quite place. Was it regret? Fear? Or was it something deeper? One afternoon, as the research station hummed with the usual mechanical sounds, Vyra came to Alistair's lab. She looked different today. There was a certain stillness to her, a quiet determination in the way she moved. "Alistair," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "we need to talk." He turned from the console where he had been working, his heart skipping a beat. He had learned to recognize the tone in her voice, the way she said his name when something important was about to be said. "Of course," he replied, pushing away the thoughts that had been distracting him. "What's going on?" Vera took a deep breath and walked closer to him. She looked at him with those violet eyes, and Alistair felt the familiar pull deep within his chest. "The Elrath Council has begun to make their move. They've suspected something between us for some time now, and the pressure is building."
The situation is becoming more dangerous. Alistair's stomach sank.
"What do you mean?"
They want us to end our contact with each other. They're worried about the consequences of our
relationship. She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "They say it threatens the very foundation of the peace we've worked so hard to build." Alistair felt a coldness spread through him. He had known this day might come, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel real, made it feel inevitable. "What are we supposed to do?" he asked quietly, his voice heavy with concern. Vyra's gaze dropped to the floor, and for a moment she seemed lost in thought. When she finally looked up at him, her expression was a mixture of sadness and resolve. "We have two choices, Alistair. We can either let them separate us, let them tear us apart, or we can fight." "Fight?" Alistair repeated, a mixture of fear and determination building in his chest. How can we fight something like this? We're just one human and one alien. We can't stand against an entire council, against the whole of your people. Vyra reached out and placed a hand gently on his arm, her touch sending a spark of warmth through him. Sometimes the most powerful thing in the universe is a single person's will. "I believe in what we have, Alistair, and I believe that together we can make a difference." Her words stirred something deep within him, something he hadn't realized he was holding back. He had been so focused on the risks, on the consequences of their love, that he had forgotten why he had fallen in love with her in the first place. It wasn't just about what they were doing, it was about what they could become, what they could offer the universe together. They were two beings from different worlds, yes, but they were also two hearts that had found each other in the vastness of space. That, in itself, was a miracle. "But the council, they'll never accept it," Alistair said, his voice breaking. "I don't want to lose you, Vera." "You won't," she replied firmly, her voice filled with a quiet strength. "But we have to be smart. We have to show them that what we have is worth fighting for." Alistair swallowed hard. The idea of standing against the Elrath Council, of defying everything they had worked for, felt impossible. But the thought of losing Vira, the thought of never being able to see her again, to touch her, to be with her, was more than he could bear. "Okay," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper.
I'll do whatever it takes for you, for us."
Vera's eyes softened, and she stepped closer to him.
We're in this together, Alistair, and we're not going to let fear control us. For the first time in days, Alistair allowed himself to believe in that.
He had spent so long running from the truth, hiding behind logic and reason. But now he realized that what they shared was more powerful than anything he had ever imagined. Their love was a force of its own, and it was something that could change the course of history if they were brave enough to fight for it. The next few days were filled with tense planning and quiet discussions. Alistair and Vira knew they couldn't act recklessly. They had to be careful, but they also had to move quickly. The Elrath Council was watching them closely, and every moment they waited was a moment closer to the discovery of their secret. Vira had shared a plan with him, one that involved using their knowledge of the Council's internal politics to manipulate the situation in their favor. It was risky, but it was their only chance. They would have to appeal to those within the Council who were sympathetic to their cause, those who believed that peace with humanity was possible, despite the complications their bond might bring. Alistair was nervous, but he trusted Vera. She had proven time and time again that she was more than capable of handling the complex politics of her people. She was clever, resourceful, and above all, she was willing to take risks for what she believed in, and he admired her for it. The night before they were to present their case to the council, Alistair found himself standing in the observation deck again, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. The station was quieter than usual, as if the entire universe was holding its breath. He felt a strange calm wash over him as he gazed into the vast unknown. Vira appeared beside him, her presence a comforting weight against the cold emptiness of space. She didn't say anything at first, simply standing there with him, side by side. "Do you ever wonder what's out there?" Alistair asked, his voice soft, almost reflective. "What else is out there, beyond the stars?" Vira turned to him, a gentle smile on her lips. "I do. I've always wondered. But I've come to realize that sometimes the most important things are the ones we already have. Like this. Like us."
Her words warmed him in a way he couldn't explain.
He looked at her, feeling the connection between them, stronger than ever. "You're right," he said quietly. "No matter what happens tomorrow, no matter what the council decides, we'll always have this. We'll always have what we've built together." Vira smiled, her eyes shining with an emotion that Alistair couldn't put into words. Yes, and that is something worth fighting for. As they stood there, looking out at the stars, Alistair realized that no matter what the future held, no matter the challenges they would face, they had each other. And for the first time in his life, he believed that was enough.